Welcome to the Point of No Return podcast, an exploration of strategy, leadership, technology, and entrepreneurship. Your host, Nectar, is the co-founder and partner at the PNR, a strategy consulting firm based in Montreal.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Point of No Return podcast, a show where we interview industry leaders, presidents, and CEOs to better understand how they think about strategy. On today's show, I spoke with Francois Lafortune, founder and CEO at Diagram. A little bit on Francois's bio before we get into it. He's an entrepreneur investor with over 15 years of experience in building businesses. He's the co-founder and CEO of Diagram Ventures, an $85 million VC fund that co-founds technology companies pursuing transformative innovation in the financial, insurance, and healthcare sectors. He's also a partner at Portag3 Ventures, a member of board of directors of Hydro-Québec. He sits on the Minister of Finance Advisory Committee on open banking. So as you could tell, Francois is definitely an overachiever, and which is one of the reasons I've been wanting to get Francois on this episode. Kind of low key, really humble in his approach, but has achieved so much still in his very early career. On the show, we spoke about how he started companies at the age of 13, what he learned in the world of management consulting, which is my world, the idea behind Diagram and building a Fintech ecosystem. Something that they innovated on was this idea of idea validation and rapid prototyping, and how he really wants to work with both incumbents and disruptors. Francois is in the empire building business, and Diagram has already created several world-class businesses. I learned a ton, and I really hope that you enjoy today's episode. Thank you. I guess a natural place to start, Francois, would be did you always want to start companies? I noticed you started companies when you were young. Was it an ambition that you always had, or did you just kind of fall into it?
Good question. I don't know how it got to me, but for so long as I can remember, I always wanted to start companies. I started my first company. I was 13. I was on the ISP scene. I owned a BBS. That's probably was my first company as like some subscriber to my BBS. Then I built my own hardware. So I thought maybe some people would like to buy a computer from me. I could build or be a competitor to Future Shop, go buy hardware pieces, assemble a computer, and sell white box. So that's really what I did for, this was my true first company where I went to the Court of Justice, registered that company and started selling computer. I was 13.
Wow. That's
so
crazy.
That was my first company. And then I always wanted to run businesses. In my teen, I started I joined a franchise system where I was doing home services, home painting houses. And then I started my own franchise system in window washing. So I've always tried to create my own job, except for a 8-year period when I was working at McKinsey. But other than that, I've always was attracted by entrepreneurship.
Was your family supportive of you at that young age? I imagine at 13, you can't drive anywhere. So most people are not driving, yet you're starting a company. So just curious as to, what your family background that led you to doing this.
Yeah. Well, so my family are not entrepreneurs. But they were very supportive. So I think that I was very fortunate to have both my parents, not killing that dream. They probably thought I was a bit crazy at the time. I don't think I don't know if they believed that I was going to be successful in building something big, but they didn't kill it or didn't say it made no sense. When I said I want to start a computer company, they said, that's fine. And when I needed to borrow money to buy the first parts to sell my first computer, they did lend me that money, and that's what got me started. So I think that was really big support. Even I remember my dad when I joined the franchise system, and I was 17 at the time. I had second doubt whether or not I should do it. I felt it was risky. I didn't know anything about painting. I didn't know if I could run or start a company. And he said, you don't have much to lose. You'll have a place to live. The worst case, you go back and you go work at McDonald's. But what do you have to lose? So, and he didn't really push me into it. But when I was debating it or having doubts, he would encouraged me to give it a shot.
Yeah. Do you think there are any lessons from those early years that you think are still applicable to what you do today?
Totally. I mean, I think selling yourself, marketing, always be selling, finding what clients want and their needs and their pain point. I think that's the essence of starting any company. The first company, selling computer, I was bundling software and trying to add like a differentiator that people like saving them time of having to download all the software on their own computer. So this was my niche or my like differentiator. So that started early when I had my franchise business. It was about managing people. I had between 8 and 10 employees working for me during the summer. And that comes with like kind of the whole like challenges, their own challenges, promising to clients some things and having to face the reality of the world to deliver it on time, on budget. So it trained me, and it really, I think, helped me a lot afterwards when I joined McKinsey, because I felt like McKinsey, I was a consultant, but I knew what it was like to be on the other side of the table and not just giving advice, but having to implement them and having to live with it often looks good on paper. An idea looks good on paper, but I always thought it's all about execution and it's a lot more about execution than strategy. And I think those early years taught me how important a hard execution is.
Yeah, you developed a thick skin, right? You develop a certain resiliency at a very young age to say, hey, I could overcome certain obstacles. And what was it about consulting that attracted you to that field?
That was really like an accident. I got an email invite to a cocktail organized by McKinsey through school. I think I was on the dean's list, so that by email somehow got to McKinsey, and I got invited to a cocktail. And I thought I really learned about it through the interview process and through these first few interactions. And what attracted me to it was the idea that I could learn from others who are smart and had seen a lot. And I think that's one of the downside of being an entrepreneur and being an entrepreneur really young, is that you're the boss and you make all the decision, and you can learn by making mistakes, can learn by observing other, but there's no real like mentoring or training or track to really learn from the best in the world. And I thought that traveling the world, working for a large company, seeing difficult challenges and being mentored by people who, had a lot more experience than me was valuable, and that could make me a better entrepreneur, in the future. So that's really what attracted me to that job, and why I ended up doing it for many years, because like the learning was steep and was ongoing, and I think became very valuable now.
Yeah. Was it part of a master plan of like, hey, I'll learn and I'll benefit from a large global organization, with obviously a lot of prestige, or do you follow your career, a little bit more opportunistically?
It was, this is the only place I applied out of school. Like I never was looking for a job. I was an entrepreneur. I had my business. But I just felt onto that opportunity, and I thought, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So that was my thought process when I was maybe 23, 24. I thought I was going to be at McKinsey for 2 years, that I would learn everything I had to learn in 2 years, and then go back and build businesses. I think the surprise was that, maybe there's a lot more to learn than I thought. And I really loved the challenges that I had there. And I ended up staying there and going to travel and work in the US and then study in the US. So it opened up a whole other world that I had no idea about. And it took much longer for me to go back to, I'm going to build companies. But I did eventually go back to that.
Yeah. Going to that time, was it hard to when you made the decision to leave? Obviously, you've been there for a while, so I imagine, as they say in French, tu as fait le tour, you've seen what the company has to offer. So was it a difficult decision? Did you wrestle a lot over it?
I mean, it was for me a difficult decision. I don't know how it is for others, but I felt like, definitely at McKinsey, the growth is there. Like if you're doing a great job, if you're, there's always like a next thing you can aspire to. There's always more learning. There's always, so they do a great job to keep, you on the treadmill. And I think what's really hard is that you end up, and it's so much, it takes so much of your time and your life that it's hard to think about other things. So it's hard to say, hey, I'm going to build a business and I'm going to use, do this on the side. You can't really do things on the side as much. So I think it's a combination of those two things, the fact that the job was very fulfilling, but also the fact that I really didn't have to carve out like time to work on the next business. And then there's like on one side, the path is clear. On the other side, there's this big uncertainty about I'm going to leave to do what, right? Because the what is unclear yet. So at some point I had to force myself to say, there will never be a good time. And I will not know what is if I don't jump off the cliff and accept that, things will work out.
Yeah. So let's talk about the what. So what and what it became, right? And I'm not sure if there was something that you did after McKinsey, but that's not diagram. You did something else, but I'd love to understand that in between period between McKinsey and diagram and your thought process.
Yeah. So at McKinsey, I focused on financial services and technology. So this was really my area of expertise. I was serving banks and insurance company on all their technology challenges. And I was in general like a specialist in Fintech, what we call Fintech. And I thought that this was a world that needed a lot more innovation, that although my clients had lots of dollar resource capability, it was hard for them to move fast. It was hard for them to be truly innovative and basically like change the world type of product and experience. And I saw what was going on in the US. I saw some of my friends at Stanford who were part of the first wave of fintech innovation, in the early 2010, 2009. So I felt like I was really in an interesting space at an interesting time, right? So I decided to leave, and my plan when I left was I will use that expertise to find a right business opportunity in fintech and launch that. And then I started working with Paul 3 at Power, and he was into a similar mindset of thinking about the future of power, thinking about what would be the next 30 year of change in financial services, and how can they be investing in the right things and being positioned in the right way so that they can benefit from that and not and not become obsolete in 10 or 15 or 20 years. So this is 2015. This is prior to their big investment in Wealthsimple, and it's really how I first got involved with them. I was leaving McKinsey. I've known him for 10 years. And he said, why don't you come and check out, some of the things we're thinking about. Maybe you can share some of your thoughts. We're looking at this Wealthsimple company. We'd love for you to help us think about that. And maybe as you build your business idea, we might find, we might be interested in investing or sharing our thoughts. So this was really more like an entrepreneur in residence type of model, which was not formally called that and not formalized in a real like venture structure. It was like we're collaborating on fintech ideas, and out of this came a few things. First, Power has made a couple of investments, most notably in Wealthsimple at the time. I came up with a bunch of business idea, all related to financial services that I thought were, interesting and disruptive, some of which are in our portfolio company right now at Diagram. And then I thought maybe there's a better way than me just starting one company. Maybe there is something more we could do, something bigger, where we could participate in the transformation of financial services by creating a platform to create companies. And that really is that's the genesis of the Diagram idea. We thought there's lots of capital, lots of expertise. We have lots of good ideas. It would be a shame that we just pick one and do one. And I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs, that don't have necessarily depth in financial services, but see the same opportunity as we saw. So could we be enabler of those people and help them, with us participate in that transformation?
Yes, it's not just your classic venture capital model. Well, you'll pick, let's say, 10 ideas, 10 horses and bet, and then hope that one goes big. It's a much more focused approach, if I understand your thesis correctly. So you'll help incubate and create some of those ideas, match them to brilliant entrepreneurs, and then provide the capital and the network with power. Is that a fair representation of what Diagram is?
Yeah. So I think I think you said it well. The first big differentiator versus a traditional venture investor is that we often start with a strong, we're very sector focused. So we're focused on financial services, insurance, and wellness. And we start with our own, thesis, our own view of what are the problems, what needs to be solved. We validate those pain point and our problem. We have a team of 5 people. That's all they do. Instead of having analysts that go and meet companies, we do research, interview, primary research. We are more like a founder, like that is looking for a problem, looking for solution, looking for white space. And along that journey, we might find a very early stage team that fits our model, that fits what we want to do, that fits our values and our thesis, and we might decide to back that team. So it maybe 20%, 30% of the time that will happen. And the rest, the majority of the time, we end up once we have a good idea that is qualified, that we feel is de-risked, where we did interviews, we did all the work that a founder would do, then we go and pitch that idea to experienced entrepreneur, and we partner with them to build a company. Right. So that makes us very different than from a traditional fund. Where it's similar is we also invest. So we put capital, we lead the round, we lead with a lot more conviction because we've done a lot of research and we know the space. So we tend to invest more into fewer companies. And we also want to optimize for a better average success. So you mentioned we have a more concentrated model. We really feel like we're founders, and we are founders because oftentimes those are companies that we started, but we're co-founder with the team, and we have the same incentive as them. So we want we don't have 20 bets and one will pay off. We want all of them to work. So it makes us work very differently.
Yeah, how would you compare it to, let's say, what a tandem launch does, which is a little bit different than what you guys do, but similar in terms of philosophy?
Yeah. So tandem launch is probably the closest. I think we start with very different starting point. So tandem launch thinks about, scouting for technology, and then they are industry agnostic. They look for technology innovation, and then they're trying to find problems to be solved with that technology, right? So that's kind of another way to think about starting a business. It's interesting because they have some technology and some IP. I think the challenge is then you need to find like what this IP can be with, and you can, and that becomes the challenge, right? Our model is different. We start with a deep knowledge of financial services and the problems of financial services, and then we look for, what are technology solutions that could address those problems? So we really start with problems and pain point as opposed to starting with technology and solutions.
Yeah, you mentioned the team that their job is just to do this, and you mentioned that first of all, it was all in your brain, right? You're coming up with the ideas and throwing spaghetti on the wall. Curious as to, kind of diving into the magic recipe, right? Like, what do you think makes that team work well, right? Like, what are the attributes that, in terms of the research or the types of people that you guys are able to come up with so far, pretty good roster of ideas that are out there, living, breathing companies?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's partly people, partly process, partly our network and our access, right? So we have a very diverse team of people with experience in design, product, consulting, banking, right? So we try to really, in our process, the first bit of the process is really more consulting type research. Like, why is this a problem in the space? Let's do primary research. Let's do interview with people. Let's validate the pain point. Let's document why, which angle is new. And then, so that's the first bit. And then it moves into more like prototyping, lean startup design thinking, where we would build a clickable prototype, or we would try to find a first client, or we would do a customer acquisition test, or we would define the product attributes, right? So we have kind of these two steps where once we have a qualified idea, we really move into more your product and design work. The attribute is to be able to source and validate quickly those ideas. I think where we have an unfair advantage is we're able to be deep expert in the field. And also when we think about let's say Breathe Life is looking to digitize the life insurance carrier. We identified that as a big trend. We could validate it with many of our investor limited partner at that pain point, and we're able in a matter of a few weeks to set up call with carrier globally around the world and to interview the head of digital of all these businesses and to validate whether or not they care about this, would they pay for it, how much would they pay for it, have they come across any solution. So this work typically would take months or a year for a founder to go from an idea to let me find the right people to talk with, to let me validate this, and we're able to dramatically speed that up through our network, through our relationship.
Yeah, it gives you almost like an unfair advantage, right? Through your relationship with Power, where you're able to like accelerate certain aspects of your different value chain, the value chain of, let's say, starting companies.
And I would say it's a lot broader than Power now. Like it started really with Power like 3 years ago, but now it really became Sagar, which is the asset manager that is investing in us, and the relationship with Portage that we have, which is one of the largest venture fund now in the world focused on fintech. So they really like see most of what's happening in fintech globally. So that's source of good insight. And the limited partner as part of this group, like all of our investors include many Canadian banks, insurance companies, some US, some European banks. So our network has gone really, really much larger. We also have 80 individual investor in Diagram, in addition to this network of corporate that are all either entrepreneur or financial services experts. So it's really this combination of people that allow us for any given sub-segment. Let's say right now we're looking at an idea in capital markets. We were able to find like 10 people to talk to within a week that could validate or not our idea.
Yeah. And how's your role changed, right? From, being the first person probably in a room with, with Paul coming up with the idea to today where you guys have, just raised the second round of 55 million, where I guess it's not just now, it's been a few months, but to the scale seems much, much bigger than, than the early days, obviously. So curious as to how, you spend your time today and how that's evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Diagram is a business, and it's a young business on its own, right? So we're starting businesses, but we are also, in the last year, we built out our processes. It started with the idea that I had in my brain, and we needed to codify on paper how we're going to do it, who's going to do what, how we move an idea from one gate to another, how do we approve it to become an investment. So we've done a lot of that work in the last 2 years. My role has become more and more making sure that we hire the right people, that the machine is working, that we open doors with the right, we give access to our network, to my team, and also to our company. So a big part of my work is still on the ideation side, but also matching founders with idea. I spent a bunch of time thinking about which is the right founder for the right idea, pitching to founders the idea that we have, right? So we're basically in the scaling phase of Diagram now, where we're moving from 2 business per year to 4 business per year. And that means, we need to be constantly meeting with new founders, pitching these ideas, adding ideas to the funnel. Another big part of my time is supporting our companies. So when we started, we only had 2 companies the first year and a half, and now we've grown to 6. So really that has taken a lot of my time in scaling that, adding partners, Amnet and Dan, who both joined in the last 2 years, Amnet this year, Dan 2 years ago, to really give a lot more support to our companies. So that is a big change.
Yeah, and you mentioned Diagram you think about it as a business, and how big do you think it can be as a business and leave a bigger footprint than today?
Yeah, I mean, our goal is to create, in the next few years, like 30, 40 businesses from scratch across, Canada, so Montreal, Toronto. We have some businesses now in the US. We're just launching one in the US. So we want to show that it's possible for venture not to be about only 20 or 30% success. you can start businesses with a much higher success rate if done differently. And that's really what we're aiming to do with our model. We need to increase our pace and our scale. We need to tap into a new founder pool to do more businesses in other geography where we can have even more founders. We will eventually look at deploying Diagram into new geographies. We think that financial services and fintech and insurtech are not the only sector that would benefit from innovation like that. So if you think about our big vision is to really make Diagram a new model to create a company where founder would feel it's a much better risk return for them.
Yeah.
That they have a better shot of success to do it with us, and that it will be more rich, and in turn that will drive more economic growth and will create jobs and will help. So I really believe that entrepreneurship is the fuel for society, and we hope to be a machine that creates that.
Yeah, like how you said, very casually, but very ambitious goals. So yeah, my hat's off then. Maybe to zoom out and talk about the industry, you mentioned fintech. I'd be curious to get your point of view on how you compare, this particular period of fintech innovation versus other periods, right? Like, do you see it as being a very unique time compared to, let's say, other periods where there's been fintech innovation, right? We can think back to early days of credit card processing, which was obviously a radical idea back then.
Yeah.
So curious as to what do you think today is special, or is there just another evolution in terms of fintech?
I think there's always waves of evolution, but and historically bank have been and financial services company have been technology company, right? So I don't think technology in financial services is not new. I think that if you compare different industry, one of the first things we did a few years ago is to look at digital transformation in commerce, in content, in payments, and different sub industry, and you could see how far behind financial services and then insurance even further behind, right? So I think that we're just at the beginning of how new models in financial services, new customer experiences, unbundling of financial services, hyper targeted, client journey and services will emerge. I think that the world where there's everyone has a standard banking experience across segment and product that world will be very different in a couple of years from now. And I think we have a lot to learn from other industry that have gone through change before financial services. And what a slow change in financial services is that it's harder. You need more expertise. Like any other changes, it's easier to start with the low hanging fruit and the easiest industry. It's regulated. So this, even if you look at the US and Europe versus Canada, we're behind because model are not portable across geography as easily. So you need to adapt the different model to the different market. But I think, we're just at the beginning.
Yeah, it's funny. It's it's not like other industries. There's roadblocks like regulation where you can't customize and have, let's say, a fast fashion model like in retail to be able to personalize tastes. And imagine, obviously, a lot of it is going to be fueled, with data and with algorithms, which I think makes it somewhat actually easier in fintech because a lot of the data is actually already digital versus other industries. I'd be curious to get your take on what you think is important today in fintech that maybe doesn't have enough attention or is maybe misunderstood.
What is misunderstood? I think open banking will really also drive another wave of innovation in financial services. I think it's the fact that it's still really hard for someone who wants to launch a financial related product or experience to go to market, and it takes years, and you need to partner with banks, and you need to jump through hoops to make that happen. I think people tend to not really understand what's required to launch and how difficult it is to launch something in financial services. I think that open banking as a service, these concepts are at the beginning, and in a couple of years that will be mainstream, and launching companies in financial services will be radically different. So I think we're in front of a wave of enabler that will make this happen. We're already starting to see this in the US and in the UK.
Interesting. Yeah. Maybe a last question, maybe related to your last point. What excites you the most about the industry? Is it this coming wave of innovation? You mentioned open banking, or are there aspects to it?
That's one of them. I think I'm really excited about wellness and insurance and having insurance company focus on helping to drive outcome and positive patient experience, like Dialogue, what we're doing with Dialogue, and bringing, healthcare to all Canadians through telemedicine services and through employer. I think this is a big trend of employer caring more and more about their employee and making this a differentiator, and trying to have wellness program and mental health program. I'm really excited that the incumbent will have to also build tool and technology to fight back. Like, there's always two sides of innovation. There's the disruptor who are trying to win and trying to build their own like full stack solution. And sometimes we take that side of the bet. And what's exciting also is that we can be working with the incumbent to help them fight back. And I think there's going to be a lot of like innovation around that, like what Breathe Life is doing. And, I think we will see a lot of more pointed solution, like what Nesto is doing in mortgage. It's mind blowing today that you don't have access to the best rate of mortgages, and that even if you go to the mortgage broker, they won't tell you what rate is, be transparent with the rates. They have all sorts of twisted incentive around, rebates and kickback that they get. And I think we will see more and more transparency in that market, and I think a company like Nesto and other point solution like this will drive a lot of customer value. So I'm really excited about all these things.
Yeah, no, and it shows. I really like that approach of like, you can have both sides. You can have the, if you can't beat them, join them, and then you can go with the screw it, let's just beat them aspect. So, Francois, this has been hugely interesting and insightful. I know I respect your time. I know you have a busy day. Maybe a final question for you is, where can people find out more about your work and what you guys are doing at Diagram?
Sure. Well, thanks for your time. You can, if you're an entrepreneur, you're thinking about something new, you're at the end of your earnout period, go diagram.ca. You'll find more about what we do, some video explaining our approach, and contact us. We'll be happy to speak with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Point of No Return podcast. Don't miss an episode by subscribing on iTunes or Google Play.